The Bride Left at Redstone Pass, Part 1. The wind swept across the Wyoming territory like it carried every untold story of the frontier. Endless grass rolled beneath a pale autumn sky, and the wagon trail stretched toward the horizon until it disappeared into a sea of golden prairie. Families pushed west with tired horses, worn-out wagons, and dreams they prayed were worth the sacrifice. At the rear of the train rode Abigail Harper, a 24-year-old schoolteacher from Illinois. She had traded the only home she had ever known for a chance at a different future. Months earlier, she had answered a letter written by a cattle rancher named Nathan Brooks, a quiet man living near Redstone Pass. Nathan's letters had never promised riches. He had written instead about long days beneath the western sun, cold winters, stubborn cattle, and lonely evenings beside a crackling fireplace. He admitted that ranch life demanded courage more than comfort, but he also promised honesty, respect, and a home where no one would have to face hardship alone. Those simple words had reached Abigail at the lowest point of her life. After losing her father to illness and watching the family farm disappear beneath unpaid debts, she had realized there was little left for her in Illinois. She wasn't searching for adventure. She wanted a place where she could belong again. Every letter Nathan sent became another reason to believe that hope still existed somewhere beyond the endless plains. As the wagon train climbed the rocky slopes leading toward Redstone Pass, dark clouds gathered over the distant mountains. The trail captain urged everyone to move faster. "Snow's coming early," he warned. "If we're still up here tomorrow, these trails could disappear beneath 3 feet of white." The wagons rolled forward with growing urgency. Rain began as a gentle drizzle before becoming a relentless downpour. Mud swallowed wagon wheels, frightened horses stumbled over slick stones, and every traveler fought to keep moving. Then disaster struck. One of the lead wagons slid sideways along a narrow ridge. The frightened horses lunged in opposite directions, jerking the wagon violently across the trail. People shouted. Children cried. The entire line stopped in confusion. Abigail jumped from her seat, hoping to help calm one of the terrified horses. Before anyone could stop her, the frightened animal reared onto its back legs. Its heavy shoulder slammed into her. She lost her footing on the wet rocks. Her body tumbled several feet down the steep embankment before crashing hard against a fallen pine tree. The sound echoed through the canyon. By the time several travelers reached her, Abigail could barely breathe. Her right leg twisted unnaturally beneath her. Every movement sent unbearable pain through her body. The wagon doctor's face grew solemn after examining the injury. "The bone's broken clean," he whispered. "Can she travel?" someone asked. The old doctor slowly shook his head. "Not for many weeks." Silence settled over the camp. The storm continued pouring through the night. Inside the trail captain's wagon, several families gathered to discuss what came next. Food was already running low. Winter was arriving far earlier than expected. Every extra day spent in the mountains increased the chance that every man, woman, and child on the trail could become trapped by heavy snow. No one wanted to make the decision. Yet someone had to. Near sunrise, the captain walked toward Abigail's campfire. His weathered face revealed the answer before he spoke. "We can't stay." Abigail lowered her eyes. Deep inside, she had already known. The captain gently explained that they would leave blankets, medicine, water, dried meat, extra firewood, and enough supplies to last several days. A trading post lay somewhere beyond the eastern hills. Someone would surely pass before long. The captain also promised to send word to Nathan Brooks the moment they reached civilization. It wasn't cruelty. It was survival. Even so, the words cut deeper than the broken bone ever could. Abigail forced a faint smile. "I understand." One by one, the wagons rolled away. Several women hugged her goodbye. An elderly couple quietly left an extra loaf of bread beside her blanket. A little boy handed her his favorite carved wooden horse. "My pa says brave people need lucky things," he whispered. Abigail thanked him through tears. Then the wagon train disappeared beyond the ridge. Only silence remained. The prairie suddenly felt enormous. For the first time in her life, Abigail understood what true loneliness sounded like. The wind whispered through dry grass. The campfire crackled softly. Far away, a lone wolf howled beneath the darkening sky. She pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I just wanted a home," she whispered to herself. The first night passed slowly. Sleep never truly came. Every strange sound beyond the fire made her heart race. Coyotes called from distant hills. Branches snapped somewhere beyond the darkness. She clutched the small revolver the trail captain had left beside her bedroll, praying she would never need to use it. Morning brought little comfort. Rain had stopped, but freezing air settled across the valley. Abigail managed to crawl toward a nearby stream to refill her water bucket. The journey of only 30 yards left her exhausted. Returning to camp took nearly an hour. She spent the afternoon feeding sticks into the fire while staring toward the empty trail. Every few minutes she convinced herself someone was coming. Every time, the horizon remained empty. On the second evening she opened Nathan's letters again. The paper had become worn from countless readings. His handwriting wasn't elegant. His words weren't poetic. Yet somehow they carried warmth stronger than the fire before her. One sentence captured her attention more than ever. "No matter how difficult life becomes, I believe every promise deserves the chance to be kept." Abigail folded the letter carefully. She smiled despite the tears filling her eyes. "I hope you're the kind of man your letters say you are." Nearly 100 miles away, Nathan Brooks was repairing a broken fence when he noticed a lone rider approaching at full speed. The horse looked exhausted. The rider nearly fell from the saddle before catching himself. "I've been looking for Nathan Brooks." Nathan stepped forward immediately. "I'm Nathan." The messenger removed his hat. His expression carried terrible news. "Your bride never reached Redstone Pass." Nathan's face tightened. "What happened?" "There was an accident in the mountains." The messenger explained everything. The broken leg. The early snow. The impossible choice. The abandoned campsite deep within the wilderness. For several long seconds Nathan didn't speak. The ranch around him fell silent. Finally, he looked toward the distant mountains rising against the western sky. "How many days?" 4. "Is she alive?" The messenger lowered his eyes. "I don't know." Nathan walked into his barn without another word. He saddled his strongest gelding. He packed blankets, dried beef, coffee, medicine, rope, extra ammunition, and enough supplies for several weeks. His elderly ranch hand, Samuel, watched quietly. "That's dangerous country," Samuel warned. Nathan tightened the saddle straps. "So I've heard. You might never find her." Nathan paused only long enough to answer. "Then I'll spend every mile trying." As the first snowflakes drifted across the Wyoming sky, Nathan guided his horse toward the mountains. He didn't know if Abigail Harper was still alive. He didn't know whether he was already too late. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. A woman had crossed half a continent believing his promise of a new beginning. He refused to let her face the wilderness alone. If you're enjoying this Old West story, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, because we'd love to hear from fellow Western story lovers around the world. The Bride Left at Redstone Pass, Part 2. Nathan Brooks rode from sunrise until long after darkness covered the prairie. The cold autumn wind bit through his heavy coat, but he barely noticed. Every mile carried a single question that refused to leave his mind. Was Abigail Harper still alive? The messenger had described the place as best he could, a narrow valley near Redstone Pass where the wagon train had been forced to leave her behind. But the frontier was vast, and one wrong turn could waste precious days. By the second afternoon, fresh snow covered much of the trail. Nathan dismounted often, studying broken branches, wagon wheel tracks, and fading hoofprints before climbing back into the saddle. He questioned every traveler he met. A fur trapper remembered seeing a wagon train several days earlier. A freight driver recalled hearing about an injured woman. Each clue pushed Nathan farther into the mountains. Meanwhile, Abigail fought a battle no one else could see. Her small supply of firewood was disappearing much faster than she had expected. Every evening the temperature dropped lower, forcing her to burn more wood just to survive the freezing nights. Moving remained painfully difficult. Using 2 sturdy branches as makeshift crutches, she managed to gather dry sticks from nearby trees. Every step sent sharp pain through her injured leg, but giving up wasn't an option. She whispered to herself each morning. One more day. Then another. On the 5th morning after the wagon train had left, she discovered fresh wolf tracks circling her campsite. They hadn't attacked. Not yet. But they knew she was there. That evening, the howls came much closer than before. Abigail kept the campfire burning as brightly as she could. She placed extra branches onto the flames until sparks danced into the dark sky. Her fingers trembled as she gripped the revolver beside her blanket. The wolves never entered the light. Still, none of them wandered far away. Hours passed before silence finally returned. Abigail never slept. Far to the west, Nathan entered a narrow canyon where melting snow had turned the ground into deep mud. His horse suddenly stopped. The animal lifted its head and sniffed the cold air. Nathan followed its gaze. Very faint. Almost invisible. A thin ribbon of smoke drifted above a distant line of cottonwood trees. His heartbeat quickened. He urged the horse forward. As he rode closer, signs of human life appeared. A broken wagon wheel. Charred firewood. Fresh footprints pressed into the soft earth. Then he saw her. Abigail sat beside a tiny fire wrapped in 2 worn blankets. Her face had become pale from exhaustion. Her clothes hung loosely after days of eating little more than dried meat and hard biscuits. She stared into the flames without noticing the approaching rider. For one terrible moment, Nathan feared he had arrived too late. Then she slowly looked up. Their eyes met across the quiet clearing. Neither spoke. Nathan climbed down from his horse and walked toward her. You must be Abigail. She nodded weakly. And you're Nathan. I am. She tried to stand. Pain forced her back onto the blanket before she had taken a single step. Nathan knelt beside her. You don't have to move. He gently placed another thick blanket over her shoulders. Without asking questions, he unpacked his supplies. A kettle soon hung above the fire. The smell of hot stew filled the cold evening air. Abigail watched quietly. I thought. She whispered. Her voice broke. I thought no one was coming. Nathan handed her a warm bowl. I gave you my word. Tears filled her eyes. I wasn't sure letters meant much out here. They mean everything. She lowered her head, unable to hide her emotion. For the first time since the accident, she no longer felt alone. Nathan carefully examined her injured leg. The swelling had become severe, but thankfully the bone remained in place. You've done well keeping it still, he said. The doctor showed me how. Nathan cleaned the wound with warm water before wrapping it in fresh bandages. The work was slow and gentle. Whenever Abigail winced, he apologized as though he wished he could take the pain himself. Night settled across the valley. The fire burned brighter than it had in days. Nathan brewed fresh coffee while Abigail quietly spoke about the lonely week she had endured. She admitted there had been moments when fear nearly defeated her. There were times I stopped believing I'd see another person. Nathan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he smiled softly. Well, You've seen one now. She laughed for the first time since leaving Illinois. The sound surprised them both. The following morning brought another difficult reality. Abigail could not ride. Even the smallest movement caused unbearable pain. Nathan studied the rough mountain trail stretching ahead. A wagon could never reach this place. Leaving her here was impossible. There was only one choice. He spent the entire afternoon cutting young pine poles and shaping them with his hunting knife. Using rawhide straps, rope, and a heavy canvas blanket, he built a sturdy carrying sled designed to rest across the back of his horse whenever the trail allowed. For narrow paths where the horse could not travel, Nathan fashioned a wooden frame he could carry himself. Abigail watched in amazement. You planned all this? I hoped I wouldn't need to. By sunset the strange invention stood complete. Nathan tested every knot twice. Nothing would be left to chance. The next morning their journey finally began. Nathan carefully helped Abigail onto the padded frame. The horse carried her across open ground with surprising ease. Whenever steep rocks blocked the trail, Nathan stopped, lifted her gently into his arms, and carried her across the dangerous sections before returning her safely to the horse. I'm heavier than I look, Abigail joked. Nathan smiled. I've carried stubborn calves twice your size. She laughed again. The miles slowly passed. As the sun slipped below the western hills, they reached a quiet meadow surrounded by towering pine trees. Nathan built a warm fire while Abigail prepared coffee from the supplies he had packed. For the first time, they shared a meal together instead of merely exchanging letters. They spoke about childhood memories. Nathan admitted he had never imagined asking for a mail-order bride until loneliness became harder than ranch work. Abigail confessed she had nearly thrown away his first letter, believing no honest man could live so far from civilization. I almost never answered you, she admitted. Nathan chuckled. That would have been a shame. It certainly would. As stars filled the clear Wyoming sky, Abigail realized something unexpected. She no longer feared tomorrow. Because whatever challenges waited beyond the next mountain, she knew she would not face them alone. If this story is warming your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable Old West adventures. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what you think Nathan will face on the journey home. The Bride Left at Redstone Pass, Part 3, Original Ending. Morning arrived beneath a sky painted with streaks of gold and pale blue. Frost covered the prairie grass, sparkling like scattered diamonds as the first rays of sunlight reached across the valley. Nathan Brooks was already awake. He knelt beside the campfire, stirring a pot of oatmeal while listening to the distant cry of hawks circling above the cliffs. Abigail Harper slowly opened her eyes. For the first time in many days, she had slept peacefully. She smiled as the smell of breakfast drifted through the crisp mountain air. I almost forgot what a warm meal feels like, she said. Nathan handed her a steaming bowl. Out here, a hot breakfast is worth more than a pocket full of gold. She laughed. I believe you. After breakfast, Nathan checked the bandages around her injured leg. The swelling had finally begun to fade. It'll take time, he said, but you're healing. They told me I might never walk again. Nathan looked at her with quiet confidence. I've learned not to listen when fear speaks louder than hope. Those words stayed with Abigail long after they packed their camp. Their journey continued south through towering pine forests and narrow mountain trails. Some days passed quietly, others tested every ounce of courage they possessed. Late one afternoon they reached an abandoned trading cabin hidden among the trees. Its roof sagged beneath years of neglect, but the walls still stood strong against the wind. Nathan decided they would spend the night inside. As darkness settled over the forest, snow began falling once again. The storm grew heavier with every passing hour. The old cabin groaned beneath powerful gusts of wind. Abigail stared through a crack in the wooden wall. I've never seen snow fall this hard. Nathan added another log to the fire. We're lucky we found shelter. Outside, the blizzard raged until sunrise. When morning finally arrived, nearly 2 feet of fresh snow covered the ground. Travel became painfully slow. Nathan led his horse through deep drifts while carefully pulling the carrying frame behind him. Several times he slipped. Several times he stood back up without complaint. Abigail watched him silently. You don't have to keep pretending you're not tired. Nathan smiled. I'm not pretending. She raised an eyebrow. Well, maybe just a little. They both laughed. Even the cold felt easier when laughter filled the silence. 3 days later they entered a broad valley where smoke drifted from a distant ranch house. Nathan recognized the place immediately. It belonged to an old friend named Elijah Turner. Elijah hurried outside the moment he saw them. Nathan. His smile quickly disappeared when he noticed Abigail resting on the carrying frame. Without asking questions, Elijah and his wife Martha welcomed them inside. Fresh bread baked in the oven. A kettle of stew simmered over the fire. For 2 wonderful days, Abigail rested in a real bed while Martha helped clean and rewrap her injured leg. Nathan finally slept through an entire night. Before leaving, Elijah placed a heavy winter coat around Abigail's shoulders. The frontier is hard enough, Martha said softly. No one should face it without kindness. Abigail hugged her tightly. I'll never forget this. As they continued toward Redstone Ranch, the land slowly changed. The mountains gave way to rolling grasslands. Cottonwood trees lined the winding creek. Nathan smiled for the first time in weeks. We're close. Abigail looked across the open country. So this is home. It will be. That afternoon they encountered an unexpected problem. A swollen creek blocked the trail. Melting snow had transformed the peaceful stream into a rushing river. The wooden bridge that once crossed it had been destroyed. Nathan studied the current. We'll have to cross carefully. Using ropes, he secured the carrying frame tightly to his horse. Step by careful step, they entered the icy water. Halfway across, the horse lost its footing. For one terrifying second everything seemed ready to collapse. Nathan grabbed the reins with both hands. The frightened horse struggled against the current. Abigail held her breath. Slowly. Carefully. The animal found solid ground once again. Moments later they climbed safely onto the opposite bank. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally Abigail smiled. I think that's enough excitement for one lifetime. Nathan laughed. I was thinking the same thing. The following evening they reached the highest hill overlooking Redstone Valley. Nathan stopped his horse. There. Abigail followed his gaze. Far below stood a modest ranch surrounded by open fields. Smoke curled from the stone chimney. A weathered red barn stood beside a quiet creek. Several horses grazed peacefully beyond the fence. It isn't much, Nathan admitted. Abigail looked at the little ranch with tears in her eyes. It's beautiful. 4 weeks she had dreamed of reaching this place. Now it stood before her. Not as a promise written in ink, but as a real home waiting beyond the hill. As they approached the ranch, neighbors gathered along the fence. Word had spread that Nathan had ridden into the mountains searching for his missing bride. Few believed he would succeed. When they saw him returning with Abigail safe beside him, silence settled across the crowd. Old Samuel stepped forward first. I figured you'd bring her home. Nathan smiled. I told you I'd try. Samuel removed his hat respectfully. You did more than that. The neighbors helped Abigail into the ranch house. Someone carried in supplies. Another neighbor brought fresh milk. Children filled the fireplace with dry wood. Without planning it, the entire community welcomed Abigail as though she had always belonged there. Winter slowly passed. Snow melted into gentle streams. Green grass returned to the valley. Every morning Nathan helped Abigail practice standing beside the porch railing. The first attempts lasted only seconds. Then a minute. Then several careful steps. Whenever she became discouraged, Nathan reminded her how far she had already come. One bright morning in early spring, Abigail surprised everyone. Without warning, she walked across the front yard using only a handmade wooden cane Nathan had carved during the winter. Samuel clapped loudly. Martha wiped tears from her eyes. Nathan simply stood smiling. "I knew you'd do it." Abigail laughed through happy tears. "I almost didn't believe it myself." A month later, wildflowers covered the hills surrounding the ranch. The neighbors gathered beneath a giant cottonwood tree beside the creek. There were no expensive decorations. No grand ceremony. Only friends, family, music played on an old fiddle, and smiles shared beneath the open Wyoming sky. Abigail wore a simple cream-colored dress Martha had sewn by hand. Nathan waited beneath the tree wearing his best ranch coat. This time, Abigail walked toward him on her own. Slowly. Carefully. But proudly. When she reached him, Nathan gently took her hands. "I thought I was traveling west to find a wife," he said quietly. "Instead, I found my greatest blessing." Abigail smiled. "And I thought I was searching for a home." She looked around at the people surrounding them. "I've found a family." The crowd applauded as they exchanged vows. The valley echoed with laughter instead of loneliness. Hope had finally reached the end of its long journey. Years passed. The little ranch grew stronger with every season. Travelers often stopped to rest there before continuing west. No one was turned away hungry. No stranger was refused a warm bed during winter storms. People often asked Nathan why he always welcomed those in need. His answer never changed. Because once, someone needed a place to belong. Abigail would smile every time she heard those words. She understood their meaning better than anyone. Their story spread across the frontier, not because it was about impossible heroics, but because it reminded ordinary people that compassion is strongest when it asks nothing in return. Sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't winning a gunfight or discovering hidden treasure. Sometimes it's simply refusing to leave someone behind. And on the endless plains of the American West, that kind of courage became the greatest legacy Nathan and Abigail ever left behind. Thank you for watching this story. If it touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel for more original Old West stories filled with courage, hope, faith, and unforgettable journeys. Leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from and what lesson this story meant to you. Until next time, keep believing that kindness can change a life, one step at a time. The end.